My name is Hazel Cooper, and the moment I saw him standing at the end of my checkout lane, grocery basket in hand, silver hair catching the fluorescent lights like some kind of ghost from a life I'd been erased from, I felt my hands go numb. It was Thanksgiving evening. The store was nearly empty. I was alone, bagging discount turkeys and canned yams for strangers who pitied the girl working holidays. And there he was, Richard Cooper, my grandfather, the man whose fortune could buy this entire chain of stores, watching me with eyes that held something I couldn't quite read. Not recognition, not shame, something worse, calculation. Have you ever been invisible to someone who should have loved you most? Let me back up, because this story doesn't start here, in this fluorescent purgatory smelling of floor wax and desperation. It starts 7 years earlier, when I was 16, and my mother, Richard's only daughter, died of ovarian cancer in a county hospital because our insurance had lapsed. I remember calling him from the hospital payphone, my voice breaking as I begged him to help with her treatment. He told me, in that crisp boardroom voice of his, that my mother had made her choices when she married my father against his wishes, and those choices had natural consequences. Then he hung up. My mother died 3 weeks later, holding my hand, apologizing for not being able to afford better care. My father tried. God, did he try. But losing her broke something fundamental in him. He started drinking, lost his job at the warehouse, and within a year, we'd lost our apartment too. I was 17, sleeping in our car, finishing high school with textbooks I'd stolen from the library, because I couldn't afford to replace the ones that got ruined when our storage unit flooded. My grandfather knew. He had to know. His company headquarters was 12 miles from the shelter where I sometimes showered. But he never came, never called, never acknowledged that his granddaughter was homeless while he attended galas and cut ribbons at charity events for disadvantaged youth. I survived on spite and scholarships, got into community college, worked 3 jobs, and clawed my way into something resembling stability. By 23, I had my own apartment, a studio with walls so thin I could hear my neighbors' every argument. But it was mine. I worked at Riverside Grocery, the nicer chain in the area, and I was good at it. Management material, they said. I'd almost convinced myself I didn't need anything from Richard Cooper's world, almost convinced myself that the anger that burned in my chest every time I saw his company's logo was just old scar tissue, nothing that could still bleed. Then came Thanksgiving, and there he stood in my lane, with his cashmere coat and his basket of organic everything, looking at me like I was a problem he was calculating how to solve. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do. I went numb, smiled my customer service smile, and started scanning his items. He didn't say anything, just watched me with those cold blue eyes, my mother's eyes, the ones I saw in the mirror every morning. When I told him his total, my voice was steady, professional, dead. He paid with a black credit card, the kind with no limit, and as I handed him his receipt, he finally spoke. "You look like her," he said quietly. "Your mother?" Something in my chest cracked. "I know," I managed. "I was there when she died." "Were you?" He flinched, actually flinched, and for a second I thought I saw something human cross his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that boardroom mask. "I'd like to talk to you," he said. "Not here. Somewhere private. I have a proposition." I almost laughed, almost told him exactly where he could shove his proposition. But curiosity is a vicious thing, and I'd spent 7 years wondering what could make a man abandon his own blood. So I agreed to meet him the next day at a cafe downtown, neutral territory, somewhere I could walk away if I needed to. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee ordered, like he'd already decided how this conversation would go. I didn't sit right away, just stood there, making him wait, making him see me fully. the daughter he'd discarded, grown into someone who'd survived without him. When I finally sat, I didn't touch the coffee, didn't give him the comfort of normal social rituals. "I'm dying," he said, no preamble, no softening. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months, maybe less." I waited, felt nothing. If he wanted sympathy, he'd come to the wrong person. "I never had other children," he continued. "Your mother was my only child, which makes you my only heir." There it was, the calculation I'd seen in his eyes at the grocery store. Not regret, not love, just the cold mathematics of legacy and bloodline. He was here because he needed me, not because he'd suddenly grown a conscience. "I'm leaving everything to charity," I said flatly. "If that's what you're worried about." He smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen on a human face. "No, I'm leaving everything to you. $73 million, the company, the properties, all of it, on one condition." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Of course, there's a condition." "I want you to take care of her," he said. "Jessica, my wife, your step-grandmother. She's fragile. The money is set up in a trust that provides for her for life. But I need someone to oversee it. Someone family." And there it was, the woman who'd convinced him to cut off my mother in the first place. The society princess who couldn't stand that her husband's daughter had married a warehouse worker, who'd made it clear that people like us were an embarrassment to the Cooper name. He wanted me to become her caretaker, to bow and scrape and be grateful for the crumbs from his table, even now. "Why would I do that?" I asked quietly. "Why would I do anything for the woman who helped you kill my mother?" "Because," he said, and his voice was hoarse now, breaking around the edges, "you're a better person than I ever was. Your mother," she tried to tell me. "Before she died, she wrote me letters. I never read them until last month after my diagnosis. She forgave me, Hazel. Even after everything, she forgave me. She asked me to watch over you. And I didn't. I was too proud, too angry that she defied me. And then, too ashamed to face what I'd done." He pulled out an envelope, hands shaking, and slid it across the table. My mother's handwriting on the front. My name in her careful script. I stared at it like it might burn me. "Take it," he whispered. "Read it, and then decide. But know this, Jessica doesn't know about the money yet. She thinks everything's going to her. I want you to tell her. I want her to know that the granddaughter she helped me abandon is now the one who controls her future. That's my revenge on myself, Hazel. Making her face what we did. Making her understand that you hold all the power now." I took the envelope with numb fingers. Didn't open it there. Couldn't. Just stood up, looked down at this man who'd let his own child die to prove a point, and said, "I'll think about it." I didn't go home. Went to my mother's grave instead. The one I'd bought with tip money and overtime. The simple stone that said she was loved even if she wasn't rich. I sat in the dead grass and finally opened the letter, my mother's voice reaching across death to gut me one more time. "My darling Hazel, if you're reading this, then my father has finally found the courage I always knew he had buried under all that pride. I don't blame him, baby. I never did. He loved me in the only way he knew how. Through control, through conditions, through the belief that money could protect people from themselves. When I chose your father, I chose love over security. And I've never regretted it for a moment. You were born from that love. You are the proof that I made the right choice. But I know Richard. I know that when I'm gone, he'll retreat into his guilt and his pride, and you'll be alone. So I'm asking you, wherever you are when you read this, whatever has happened, forgive him, not for his sake, for yours. Anger is a prison, sweetheart, and I didn't raise you to live behind bars of anyone's making, even your own. And Jessica, God, Jessica is so small inside, so terrified of not mattering. I actually pity her. She's never known what it's like to be loved without price tags attached. If you ever have the chance to show her real kindness, the kind that asks for nothing back, please do. Break the cycle, baby. Be bigger than all of us. You are my greatest achievement. Not in spite of our struggles, but because of them. You know what matters now. You know the difference between wealth and worth. I love you forever, Mom. I cried there in the dead grass until I had nothing left. Until the groundskeeper came and gently told me they were closing. And somewhere in that grief, I made my decision. Not because of the money, not for Richard's redemption arc, but because my mother, who died in a county hospital with $47 in her checking account, had somehow still believed in grace. Richard died 5 weeks later, faster than anyone expected, the cancer aggressive and merciless. I was there, in his hospital room, the private one in the good hospital, the kind my mother never got, holding his hand while Jessica sat in the corner, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked at me at the end, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "Thank you." I'd like to say I felt closure. I felt nothing. Just tired. The will reading was exactly the circus I'd expected. His lawyer, a thin man with glasses that kept sliding down his nose, read the terms in a monotone that somehow made the numbers more obscene. 73 million in assets, the controlling share of Cooper Industries, 4 properties including the family estate where my mother had grown up, and the trust for Jessica, $5 million managed by me, the executor of the estate. Jessica's face went through every stage of grief in 30 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining. She turned to me, her carefully maintained composure cracking, and hissed, "You poisoned him against me. You, with your Poverty Act, your manipulation." "Mrs. Cooper," the lawyer interrupted. "Mr. Cooper made these arrangements months before he contacted his granddaughter. She had no influence on his decisions." That stopped her. The realization that Richard had planned this, had chosen to give everything to the granddaughter he'd abandoned while leaving his wife dependent on that same granddaughter's goodwill. It was cruel. It was calculated. It was exactly the kind of revenge my grandfather had promised, making her face the consequences of helping him discard his family. I could have enjoyed it, could have let her drown in that realization, twisted the knife with a smile. My mother's letter was in my purse, worn soft from rereading, and I could hear her voice. "Break the cycle, baby." So I did something Jessica didn't expect. I asked the lawyer for a private moment, and when he left, I sat down across from her. This woman who'd spent decades perfecting the art of looking through people she considered beneath her. "I'm not going to punish you," I said quietly. "The trust stands. You'll be taken care of. But I need you to understand something. My mother died because your husband, because my grandfather, decided his pride was more important than his daughter's life. She died in pain, in a place that smelled like disinfectant and despair, holding my hand and apologizing for being poor. Do you understand what that does to a person? Watching someone you love die unnecessarily?" Jessica's hands were shaking. She'd gone pale under her perfect makeup. I didn't I didn't know it was that bad. He said she was fine, that she'd chosen to cut us off." "She didn't cut you off. You cut her off. You told him to choose between her and you, and he chose you. And then she died. And then I was homeless at 17 while you were redecorating the estate for Christmas parties." Tears now, real ones carving through foundation. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "God, I'm so sorry. I was jealous. She was everything I wasn't. Brave enough to choose love, strong enough to walk away from money. I was terrified Richard would realize I'd only ever loved his status, his wealth. So I made him cut her out, made him prove he'd chosen me. And I've hated myself for it every day since. It wasn't enough, could never be enough. But it was something. some small acknowledgement of the damage done, the lives destroyed by pride and pettiness, and the desperate human need to matter. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to move out of the estate. I'm turning it into a shelter, free housing for families in crisis, the kind my father and I needed. You're going to help me run it. Not as charity work you do for photo ops, real work, cleaning rooms, serving meals, looking people in the eye and seeing them as human." She stared at me like I'd suggested she fly to the moon. I don't I don't know how to do any of that." "Then you'll learn. Or you'll live very comfortably on your trust fund and die having never mattered to anyone. Your choice." I stood up to leave, and her voice stopped me at the door. "Why?" she asked. "Why give me a chance at all, after everything we did to you?" I thought of my mother, dying with grace she shouldn't have had to have, forgiving people who didn't deserve it because holding on to anger would have made her small, would have made her like them. "Because someone has to break the cycle," I said, "and my mother taught me how." 6 months later, the Riverside Haven opened its doors. 40 rooms in the Cooper estate, each one named for something my mother loved: grace, hope, perseverance, kindness. We housed families for up to 6 months, helped them find jobs, get kids into schools, rebuild their lives. And Jessica was there every day, wearing jeans for maybe the first time in her life, learning names, hearing stories, slowly understanding what her choices had cost. I won't pretend she became a different person overnight. Change is slow and imperfect, and sometimes you relapse into old patterns. But I'd see her sitting with a single mother whose car had broken down, really listening, offering help without judgment. And I'd think maybe revenge isn't about destruction. Maybe real revenge is forcing people to become better than they wanted to be. I kept working at Riverside Grocery. Turned down the management position, though. Too many hours away from the shelter. Used the Cooper money to set up scholarships at community college. Paid off medical debt for families in the old neighborhood. Funded free clinics in the parts of town where my mother had died. Stayed in my studio apartment with the thin walls because I didn't need more. Didn't want to become the kind of person who measured worth in square footage. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I visited her grave with fresh flowers, peonies, her favorite, the expensive kind I could never afford before. Jessica came with me. We stood there in silence for a long time before she spoke. "I dream about her sometimes," Jessica said quietly. "Your mother. We only met a few times before everything. She was kind to me. I was horrible to her, all ice and judgment, and she just smiled and asked about my interests, tried to find common ground. I've never understood why." "Because she knew something you didn't," I said. "That being cruel takes more energy than being kind. And she had a sick kid and a struggling husband and a father who disowned her. She didn't have energy to waste on cruelty." "She was stronger than all of us," Jessica whispered. "Yeah," I agreed. "She was." We stood there until the sun started to set, two women connected by grief and guilt, and the thin hope of redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. Not exactly. Forgiveness is complicated when the damage done can never be undone. But it was something. Some small acknowledgement that we were all just humans, stumbling through the dark, trying not to destroy each other in our fear. That night, back in my studio, I pulled out the last thing my mother had left me, a journal she'd kept during her illness. I'd been too afraid to read it before, terrified of finding anger, bitterness, regret. But now I opened it to a random page and found this: "Watched Hazel sleep today. She'd fallen asleep on the hospital chair again, insisted on staying even though visiting hours ended. She has Thomas's stubborn chin and my father's eyes, and something entirely her own, this fierce determination to make the world softer than she found it. I'm not afraid of dying anymore. I'm only afraid of not seeing what she becomes. But I know, bone deep, that she'll be magnificent, that she'll take all this pain and all this loss and somehow, Impossibly. She'll make it beautiful. I closed the journal and cried for the last time. Not from grief, but from the terrible responsibility of becoming the person your mother believed you could be, of taking the broken pieces of your family's legacy and building something that doesn't cut. The shelter is still running. We've housed over 300 families now. Jessica works there 4 days a week, and last month I caught her crying in the kitchen after hearing a mother thank her for giving them a place to celebrate her daughter's birthday. She's still learning, we both are. I ran into one of the fathers from the shelter the other day. He'd gotten a job at the power company, moved his family into their own apartment. He stopped me on the street to tell me his daughter was top of her class now, wanted to be a doctor. Because of you, he said. Because you gave us a chance when the world said we were done. I thought about telling him it wasn't me. It was my mother's kindness passed down, my grandfather's guilty conscience monetized. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it was me after all, choosing every day not to become the kind of person who looks at suffering and calls it consequences, choosing to break the cycle instead of perpetuating it. That's the thing about revenge I've learned. The world tells you it's supposed to feel sweet, that destroying your enemies should fill the hollows their cruelty carved out. But the truest revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. It's taking everything that was used to hurt you and making it beautiful. It's looking at the people who damaged you, and instead of becoming like them, becoming so thoroughly yourself that you change the entire shape of the story. My name is Hazel Cooper, and I was bagging groceries alone on Thanksgiving when my grandfather walked back into my life with $73 million and a guilty conscience. He thought he was giving me revenge, the chance to make his widow suffer for the choices they'd made. But my mother taught me something better than revenge. She taught me that the most powerful thing you can do to people who've wronged you is refuse to become them. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't crushing your enemies. It's becoming so completely, radiantly yourself that even your pain becomes purposeful.